Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to NASCATV. We're excited to have you with us this afternoon. As you're dialing in, please take a moment to rename yourself and include your state or company name so that we know who's with us on today's call. If you have a second, also drop your information in the chat. We'd love for you all on the call to connect with each other, and we'd love to connect with you from NASCA as well. Again, welcome into today's conversation for another edition of our National Emerging Issues webinar. Today, we will be discussing building electrification. I'm Kathleen Kelly, the research manager here at NASCA. We're thrilled to have you all with us today to have a conversation around this important issue for state governments. I'm joined by a distinguished panel who'll be with us sharing their expertise and thought leadership. Before we start, just a few reminders. Today's webinar is being recorded and it will be available up on NASCA's Knowledge Center in just a few days. Also, during today's webinar, we invite you to submit questions or comments using the chat and/or the Q&A feature. We're going to start things off with a few poll questions to see where you are all at with building electrification in your organizations. Claire, if you could launch this first poll, that would be great. All right. How much of a priority are building electrification efforts and sustainable solutions for state government facilities? So we'd love for you all to take a second and respond to this. High priority, neutral, low priority, or not applicable. All right. Give folks a moment or so to select the answer that best applies. Again, this is a poll question on what you think the priority level is for building electrification efforts. This will provide a good background information for our discussion today. All right. Let's see where people are at. Claire, if you could post the results. Okay, so we got 67 say it's a high priority, so the majority say it's a high priority. Neutral followed by is 20%, and low priority, not applicable, are up at 7. So for most people, this is a high priority. For others, it's kind of neutral. All right, to know, Claire, if you could launch our second poll question. Thank you. What are your concerns regarding building electrification and sustainable solutions for state government facilities? So this is a choose all that apply. We have funding or costs, infrastructure, including resilience of the power grid, modernizing older facilities, building codes do not mandate electrification, it's not a state priority, or multi-departmental collaboration and integration, or other. All right, again, we'll give folks a few more seconds to select all the answers that apply. Again, this one is on your concerns with building electrification and sustainable solutions. All right, let's see what we got here. Claire, if you could post the results. Okay. As I suspected, funding and cost, and I think you all understand that as well, is the highest concern with 92%. Infrastructure, the resilience of the power grid is at 58. And I can do math here. 75% is the second highest with modernizing older facilities. And then we have infrastructure and building codes is after that. And then a few multi-departmental collaboration, 33%. So it's a good mixed bag here. Again, what we see a lot is the funding and cost. That's certainly an issue for everyone. So thank you all for answering these polls and providing us this insight. It's a great way for us to get started in today's conversation. We're thrilled to have you again to NASCA TV. NASCA TV is an ongoing opportunity to meet with thought leaders who are members of NASCA and engage with other states and companies to address emerging issues affecting state governments across the board. I want to introduce you to our wonderful lineup of panelists. First up, we have Anna M. Lasso, who's director of the Department of General Services for the state of California. Chris Kearns, the acting energy commissioner of the Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources. And Emily Rubenstein, the deputy commissioner of resilience and sustainability in the New York State Office of General Services. Again, thank you all for being with us on today's webinar. I'd first like to ask our panelists to please introduce themselves and give an overview of their areas of responsibility in their respective states. Emily, we're going to start with you.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for having me here today. Again, my name is Emily Rubenstein. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for our newly created Division of Resiliency and Sustainability at the New York State Office of General Services, or OGS. Our agency delivers essential services to our state and local partners, as well as the general public. We provide critical shared services and often unseen work for the state, including managing capital projects with our very large design and construction team, managing more than 20 million square feet of real estate, providing centralized procurement contracts and logistics and warehousing support. This is a really exciting time to be working on sustainability in New York State. The recently passed Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or CLCPA, sets an ambitious statewide goal of an 85% reduction in economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And our new division is really uniquely positioned to support other state agencies in doing their part to help the state meet this goal. Our work is focused on implementing agency fleet electrification, decarbonization of our buildings, supporting the development of renewables across state assets, reducing GHG emissions across all of our operations, and adapting our state assets to the impact of climate change. So with that, I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Emily. And Chris?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Chris Kearns with the Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources, Acting Energy Commissioner. Our office oversees a pretty broad portfolio, depending on the day and the subject or the issues that arise, ranging from energy efficiency, land-based renewables, energy security, EV charging infrastructure, to our ongoing and next offshore wind project scheduled to start construction over the next several months in federal waters. So looking forward to the discussions today.
Thank you. And Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna Lassa, the Director of the California Department of General Services, or as many know it, DGS. And I was appointed by Governor Newsom about 2 years ago to this position, but I'm not new to the state. I used to manage a local regional park in Southern California, also for the state, but moved on to DGS 2 years ago, and DGS serves the state as the business manager. We also provide a lot of services to the public, but for our state agencies specifically, we are the procurement arm to the state. We manage all the state's real estate, all the fleet assets, and provide legal services to our state departments and agencies. We also include the Division of the State Architect, California Building Standards Commission, the Office of Administrative Hearings, the Office of the State Printer, the California Commission of Disability Access, and the Office of Public School Construction. So that's quite a bit. But with regards to today's panel, DGS has the Office of Sustainability, and we lead the charge in developing and installing sustainable infrastructure throughout the state, such as solar panels, EV charging stations. We also manage the state's large fleet, and we manage purchase power agreements and lead the charge with the state's agencies and departmental sustainability roadmaps that all flow into an outward-facing website that shows California's progress in sustainable efforts. And that's DGS.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for being with us today to discuss this important topic. We're excited to dig into today's conversation on building electrification. So let's get started today with our conversation with a quick question on the overall theme. So this one is for all of you. So how do you measure the success of building electrification efforts? Is that energy savings, emission reductions, cost savings? Anna, we're going to start with you.
Great. So we measure electrification efforts through various means. We track all forms of energy use for all state facilities through the Energy Star Portfolio Manager and compare it with our 2003 baseline year. We track emission reductions for state operations for Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions through the Climate Registry Information System, or CRIS database. And since 2010, California agencies have reduced their emissions by 64%. We also track and report our renewable energy purchases through the EPA's Green Power Partnership, Currently, 31% of electricity purchased by state agencies come from clean, renewable sources. And we establish targets for these efforts through a variety of means, including legislation, executive orders, and state policies. California displays these metrics on the public-facing website, which I mentioned earlier. It's www.green.ca.gov, as well as highlight the agency's plans through all key areas through those sustainability roadmaps, which my Office of Sustainability works in collaboration with everyone to get those roadmaps submitted on time. And so those are some of the ways we measure success.
Yeah, very neat. I think for the audience here, we'll post that website into the chat so you can all access it. Some good measures there. All right. Emily, you're up next with this question. So how do you measure building electrification efforts?
Sure, absolutely. And it's great to hear what other states are doing. I think the data is really key here. And I think that's something that my team is certainly working on sort of getting a better picture of for state operations. And so specifically in terms of success, sort of how we define it, we're really looking at emissions reductions. And these are obviously, we're talking about, in a lot of cases, very complex projects and that don't always have extensive cost savings in the short run. And I think we've done an amazing job to date in terms of energy efficiency. And there's a very successful program managed by the New York Power Authority called Build Smart that has tracked energy efficiency savings by all state agencies and their facilities over the past decade. OGS in particular has made significant strides in improving their energy efficiency, and we're very proud of that track record. I think there are also a lot of opportunities to reduce GHG emissions also from our construction work, and that's something that we're looking at very closely.
I appreciate that. Yeah, certainly, data is something that we see across the board with any issue that's important to track and, increasingly over the years. So Chris, I pass this question over to you as well. And I see you've already posted some links in the chat, so thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and in terms of overall energy tracking with our objectives, ultimately we now have a new state law in terms of Act on Climate that requires certain emission reduction targets by 2030 through 2050. And what we've been really doing is known as lead by example in terms of both state properties, local schools, municipalities, quasi-state agencies, where we rolled out the lead by example. It was an initial executive order going back to 2015 that we basically implement and track year to year in terms of overall objectives in terms of state facilities and emission reductions, whether that's through LED lighting, more efficient furnaces, boilers, those type of measures. So, we've been doing it for the last several years, and the best way that we've been just doing is, again, through the lead by example. I put a link in the webinar chat where we kind of document year to year our progress in terms of where we stand with meeting our annual goals.
All right, appreciate that. And I welcome anyone who's on the call to post, what they've been doing as far as, how they measure, if they have any data, anything like that. I welcome you guys to put it in the chat as well. So in the United States, buildings account for nearly 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. Building electrification, also known as beneficial electrification or building decarbonization, describes the shift to using electricity rather than burning fossil fuels like oil, gas, and coal. With intentional design and analysis, building electrification can increase efficiency, cut costs, improve indoor air quality, and enhance safety. Today's discussion will focus on how state chief administrators and their teams can help reduce their state's greenhouse gas emissions and improve their efforts to electrify existing buildings and construct new state facility buildings with an all-electric building in mind. Now let's move on to some more specific aspects of our conversation today. So Chris, I'm going to throw it back to you with our next question. Through our earlier poll, we saw that infrastructure, and more specifically, the resilience of the power grid, is a concern when it comes to prioritizing building electrification for state government facilities. Is it this a concern that you've seen or experienced? And if so, how is the state of Rhode Island working through these concerns to ensure that the resilience of the power grid is good? Oh, you're on mute.
So certainly Rhode Island's a little unique just to our geographical size. I joke with people, depending on who's on this call today, that in Rhode Island, you can be in and out of the state within about 30 to 40 minutes, whereas with some states, it takes a couple of hours. So we have a small footprint compared to some like my counterparts in other states. So obviously utility resiliency and just overall energy operations are critical for a number of our facilities. And certainly one big thing that we actively try to participate when we have those peak demand or issues, whether it's a cold snap or heat waves that we experience, is obviously demand response measures that we implement. We're also, as a number of my counterparts are just starting to grapple with the funding that's coming from the federal level, including the utility resiliency funding. Hopefully we'll start to get some of that funding later on this year and examine opportunities, not only for state properties, but also municipal-based properties that are tied to the utilities. Again, in Rhode Island, we have one primary utility being Rhode Island Energy, previously National Grid. And then we have two very small utilities, one in the northern part of the state, and then the other one being on Block Island. So we have a little bit more, we're a good incubator or a test for a number of things just because of our small geographical size. So it's certainly important. We're always trying to identify opportunities to improve. The best response is energy efficiency investments that we try to maximize on state properties, and that we continue to do. Demand response, and then some of the more innovative stuff, maybe on the utility resiliency, microgrids. Those are certain things that we're going to be exploring over the next few years.
And thank you for that. I think Anna and Emily wish they had that problem too, being very large states, but that's neat, kind of what you talk about with being able to experiment a little and be an example for other states. So I appreciate that. Now we're going to go over to Emily. So as you mentioned, you oversee the Division of Resiliency and Sustainability. So the RNS team provides technical assistance and policy guidance to New York State agencies and authorities in order to meet New York's climate goals. So as you mentioned, one of those goals is a statewide 85% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, which is very admirable and very impressive, by the way. So how do efforts to decarbonize state facilities help meet that goal?
Sure, absolutely. And one thing I will say is that we've been working on the path of energy efficiency for quite some time, and as I mentioned, been very successful. I think end-use electrification is sort of the key partner to that, and I think that's something that we're embarking on, doing a lot of studies on, working very closely with both NYSERDA and NYPA and other agencies to pursue. And in the spirit of leading by example, and I'll talk a little bit more about our recent executive order, but we are looking to support other agencies in really supporting both new construction systems and really meeting the goals of our recently signed executive order, leading by example. That was signed in September of this past year. And in it included a mandate for all new construction for state buildings to avoid infrastructure, building systems, or equipment that burn fossil fuels. And so we're working with agencies to talk right now really about what does that look like? What does that mean? How does that work? In a situation where budgets were set, in some case, your capital budget was set several years ago. How are agencies going to manage the additional cost of decarbonization? So we're working closely with agencies to look at sort of what are the steps to analyzing that. And obviously remain very committed to decarbonizing our buildings and meeting our climate goals. We have been working again with partners on some exciting studies that look at both Empire State Plaza, which is my background, for those of you who are not familiar with the Capitol of Albany, as well as the rest of our 20 million square feet of real estate that we manage across New York State. And that's going from New York City all the way to Buffalo. And that's, just for context, an amount equal to some of the largest commercial owners in New York City. And it includes some very large campuses, and specifically in Albany. And so in those studies, we're looking at what's sort of the next iteration. So we have this extensive building stock that in a lot of cases is distressed due to lack of investment over time. And as we look to modernize our buildings and building stock and really look forward both for the future of work in the state of New York, and also sort of what does it mean to have healthy carbon neutral buildings. For existing building stock, that's really challenging. And so we're looking at specifically right now for Empire State Plaza in Albany, a really exciting study of what does this entail? What does this look like? What are some different kinds of systems that we can pursue in lieu of having new construction? So what does it look like to have decarbonization for existing building stock? I would say another aspect that's, I think, is really exciting and part of our overall strategy is looking at reduction of embodied carbon through new required accounting, and the requirement to have agencies record and document embodied carbon in construction materials is part of a guidance that is going to be coming out, flowing from our executive order that was issued last year. So that's something we're also very much looking forward to pursuing.
Yeah, thank you for that. The study that you were referring to, is that going to be available for the public in a couple of years or so, or what's the timeline with that?
Sure. I think we're hoping to have some results by the end of the year going into next year.
Great. Appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Anna, this next one's for you.
Sure.
So one way to focus on building electrification or decarbonizing a building is through zero net energy efforts. So in 2008, California's first long-term energy efficiency strategic plan, a long name there, I'm sure it has an acronym, that was adopted. The plan calls for 50% of new state buildings and major renovations to be zero energy by 2025, and 50% of zero existing state-owned buildings be zero energy by 2025. Can you tell us more about zero net energy and what your office is doing to prioritize zero net energy for state buildings?
Yes, quite a bit under our portfolio and throughout the state. And yes, everything does have an acronym. And like Chris says, it does take more than half an hour to cross even a city. For instance, my commute this morning was like an hour and 15 minutes. So that's just the painful part of being in a very large city. But going back to your question, Kathleen, so in 2013, then Governor Jerry Brown signed Executive Order B 1812. And that required new state buildings to be zero net energy, as well as 50% of existing building areas to be Z&E by 2025. So that was sort of, it set the goals, right? In 2017, a state policy was issued requiring all new builds, major renovations, and build-to-suit leased buildings beginning design to be zero net energy. So the policy started to follow into action. And then California has issued even more stringent policies for state facilities since then, requiring new buildings, major renovations, and build-to-suit leases beginning design after 2017 to be zero net energy, period. So the state's first Z&E facility was verified in 2015. And now 8 years later, the state has 50 facilities completed or verified. That totals about 23 million square feet, or 21% of the total state building area. And this also includes 10 state prisons or correctional facilities. At DGS and the California Air Resources Board, we've been working to achieve this zero net energy on 50% of our buildings. And we're working to achieve this not only in Sacramento, because we've built so many new buildings in Sacramento, but anytime that we're upgrading any one of our statewide buildings. We've developed resources and educational materials for zero net energy for all the state agencies, providing them with, opportunities to let us know how they'd like to see and re-envision their building, because DGS performs a lot of the work. We're installing renewable energy, electrifying our fleet with little or no capital budgets. So that's, one of the struggles. But last September, California's governor, now Gavin Newsom, signed into law Senate Bill 1203, and this aims to achieve zero emissions from state operations by 2035. So that's not just buildings, but also our operations. We've been working toward this decarbonization and zero emissions for many years. And we are also required that LEED certification for any new and existing building be met. So we now have 271 LEED certified buildings totaling over 25 million square feet. So we're trying our best to meet the call to action with the funds that were given to us. So kind of speaking to what Emily mentioned, how do you take the dollars that were approved years ago to meet new policies as they're set forth in real time?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm sure that's an issue that a lot of people are facing. And, those are, for both New York and for California, both very ambitious goals. And it seems like there's a lot of leadership behind it and a lot of priority. But if there's, no dedicated money to it, I'm sure that can be really hard to do. So, kudos to all three of you for the efforts your states are doing. So thank you for that. Claire, it is now time for our third and final poll. If we could launch that. All right. In which ways is your organization focusing on building electrification or building decarbonization? So we've touched a little bit on each of these here, but just to go over, so facilities are fully or partially powered by solar, wind, or another source of zero carbon electricity. Energy efficiency goals and or policies are in place or are being put in place. As Anna just mentioned, the utilization of the LEED rating system for facilities, compliance with the International Energy Conservation Code, all electric and or clean building codes or standards for new buildings. You're just getting started or looking into some options and other areas. All right, so we'll give folks a moment or so to select all the answers that apply here. Again, this is a multiple choice answer question with multiple choice answers on which ways your organization is focusing on building electrification, building decarbonization. All right, let's see what we got. Claire, if you could post the results, please. Okay. So 85%, the highest here, we have energy efficient goals and or policies in place. That's a pretty popular one. Following up is the utilization of the LEED rating system for facilities. Again, what Anna was just speaking to that they do in California, and I'm sure also in many other states. And then 31%, we've got a tie here. Facilities are fully or partially powered by solar, wind, or another form of clean energy. That's really neat to see. And then, as I suspected too, just getting started looking into some options. And then we've got a few lower down, but this is really neat. I appreciate everyone participating in this. So good to see the mixed bag here. For those that are just getting started, looking for some other options, hopefully this webinar helps provide some of that information. So thank you, everyone. Our next question is going to go to all of the panelists. So another way to gain the benefits of building electrification is to shift the source of power for a building to a renewable or clean source. This has been talked about a little bit today. But for each of you, how is your state incorporating renewable and or clean sources of energy for state facilities? We're going to start with Emily this time.
Great, thanks. So as I mentioned, in September of 2022, Governor Hochul passed a really ambitious executive order for all state entities mandating that by 2030, 100% of our electricity used by our agencies would come from clean energy. And that mandate really mirrors the commitment that was made as part of our Climate Act to which set a goal of a zero emission electricity sector by 2040, including 70% renewable energy generation by 2030, and a goal of economy-wide carbon neutrality by 2050. And of course, direct power from renewable sources is one of the ways to comply with the clean energy goal for operations. We're going to work with our partners, NYSERDA being one, to understand the clean energy baselines that require different offsets and look at procurement of RECs in certain cases, and see what kind of mix that will have. But just today, there was actually an exciting announcement, and there continues to be a series of announcements of how state agencies are leveraging their own property to develop renewables, both behind the meter and push back into the grid. And so both at the state agency level with our properties across the state, we've been looking for opportunities to expand both different kinds of renewables, whether that's looking at solar. We have a very robust plan for hydro coming in and new transmission lines that will be built, again, supporting this goal that we're intending to reach by 2040. So a lot of agencies are actively working on that, supporting the development of those transmission lines and all the other work that has to happen to make that happen.
Sounds like a lot of work ahead, but some good plans. The hydroelectric is very interesting. You don't hear that one too often, so it's pretty cool. So thank you, Emily. All right, Anna, back to you with the question of so incorporating renewable and or clean sources of energy for your state facilities.
Sure. So we look to obtain our renewable energy at state facilities through various means. The first is on-site generation at 120 state facilities through direct purchases or funded through power purchase agreements. So those are our PPAs. We have off-site generation through long-term 20-year community solar agreements, saving the state millions of dollars over the term of those agreements. And then we have a green power purchase through utilities and community choice aggregate CCAs for hundreds of state facilities. So those are the three types of renewable resources. The state already gets 31% of its electricity from clean renewable sources. And we have over 80 megawatts of on-site renewable energy and 40 megawatts of off-site generation. And these numbers are increasing. Senate Bill 1020 was signed in September of 2022, lots of 20s there, and required state agencies to purchase 100% clean renewable energy by December 31, 2035. So our state operations become, as they become more electrified, the state will purchase less natural gas or combustible fuels and more electricity, and more renewable sources will be needed. So we're looking to incorporate energy storage to improve resiliency, of course, and help grid reliability.
Appreciate that. And Chris.
Yeah, so for Rhode Island, this past year, we signed the 100% renewable energy standard for electricity generation by 2033. And the state has basically looked at two ways or multiple ways in terms of renewable procurement tied to state facilities. One is maximizing any potential rooftop behind the meter, net meter type solar systems. I could send it in the chat. I just send a link of our building. We have solar systems deployed across the campus near the Rhode Island State House. And then we have, I believe, roughly 75 to 80% of our utility accounts, electricity utility accounts tied to what you guys have probably heard before is virtual net metered renewable systems in different parts of the state, some on old auto body gravel pit landfill locations, some on brownfield sites, some in like quarry locations in terms of, I'm assuming some of my colleagues have dealt with the issues of solar siting and where do you site solar in terms of the conflicts that emerge. So we've been gradually proceeding in terms of maximizing rooftop solar for certain locations, and then tying a number of our utility accounts, both state agencies, quasi-state agencies, some of our public universities to virtual net meter based systems where the state or the quasi-state or the municipality is connected with a local renewable project over the next 20 to 25 years.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Thank you. Lots of good work happening across the board here. So this next question is also going to be for all three of you. Can you provide our viewers with a brief overview of the few of the challenges you've currently experiencing or have experienced while implementing energy efficiencies in state facilities and the steps you plan to take or are currently taking to overcome these challenges? I think we've touched upon a few of them, kind of budget cycles and not having the costs there, but if you could dig into that a little bit more. Chris, we're going to go back to you to answer this one. Yeah,
I think generally one is the funding source. Sometimes we have a lot of projects, but we just don't have the budget to carry them all out in a given year. So sometimes we have to spread out those investments, and some of those investments take several years, including converting all of our state facilities along with highway lighting to LED lighting. That's taken a number of years to pursue that across the state. And then ultimately, as we all know, states have their bureaucracies and timing and processes and procurements and RFPs, and just lining these projects up take a couple of years. So generally, those are the two kind of issues that emerge in terms of how long some of these projects take from a concept to an RFP to contracting with a vendor to then identifying the applicable state funding source to carry out the work. Gotcha. So it's complex. That's strange, but appreciate that. All right, Emily, going over to you.
Sure. Again, I'm going to go back to cost. I think due to sort of the challenges with state budgets over the past decade, I think a lot of our buildings, and I would say most likely a lot of state buildings across the country have really suffered from disinvestment. And I think trying to catch up on that deferred maintenance is really challenging, coupled with these new mandates. I would also say, in addition to sort of the direct cost of decarbonization of existing buildings and shifting away from fossil fuel burning facilities, I think there's also a challenge on the cost for just on the renewable side and expanding renewables. So there have been articles about this over the past several months, but regarding specifically interconnection costs. And that's something that's also a big challenge. It's not just about construction within our own buildings, but it's also the grid more broadly and looking at how we expand renewables and the cost for that. I think another aspect of this shift is really training and building capacity. And while I wouldn't say it's particularly a barrier, I do think it's definitely going to be a growing challenge in looking at opportunities and really looking at how to integrate some of these shifts whenever we are doing upgrades. And all of that will take capacity building, it'll take training. We have some great partners in New York State that are looking to do exactly that.
Yeah, I think that's one I hadn't thought of before, but the training piece of it, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of new tech going on as well with, different sources of energy. So thank you, Emily. And to you, Anna.
Sure. So I'm going to echo what my colleagues have said. It's funding, right? It's a key challenge for the state to make improvements to our existing building inventory. I think it's much easier when you're budgeting and designing new buildings because you know that you're building that into the scope. But it's far more challenging to go to our existing building footprints, especially these buildings that are over 100 years old, to improve them and implement that energy efficiency, because you're changing out the whole mechanical engineering of system of that building, and you're bringing it up to code. And those buildings aren't necessarily getting funds for new dollars; they're getting deferred maintenance funds, which tend to be, you're kind of just barely catching up. So I think that's one of the big challenges. I'd also say that a lot of our agencies struggle to just fund basic things like life safety, fire code issues, accessibility, and years of deferments. So trying to do that and on top of that, electrify, it's just a very huge lift. But we do have some choices on the table for folks, and that's that DGS provides services to state agencies to improve energy and water efficiency, mostly to existing buildings, with no costs to those state agencies. And some of these alternative financing mechanisms include our energy service company, or ESCO projects, utility on bill financing and incentives, power purchase agreements for on-site renewable energy. And we also look to our federal partners and try to find those incentive programs and, partner with that, those funding sources to help offset some of our costs.
I appreciate that. And that's a good point. I think there seems to be a lot more federal monies coming lately with sustainable solutions. So hopefully that is helpful to all. But thank you. Looking at my watch here, we have a couple minutes or so for some audience questions. And I think I've seen a few come through. So thank you all for your questions. This first one, so how are you collecting the data that's being used to update your dashboards and reports to the public? Are you using a specific tool? Is the data collected, reported by each department? And do you have a specific budget or resources to assist with the collection and reporting of this data? So I think this is a very good question, and we're going to ask it to everyone. So I'm going to go to Emily first. Sorry to throw you in the mix there first, but so how are you collecting the data that's being used to update your dashboards?
Sure, absolutely. This is something, again, we're really looking at best practices right now to improve and really solidify the sort of rigor around. New York State has pursued GHG inventories for several years. There's been less of a focus on state agency operations specifically. Teasing that information out and that data out can be a challenge. So it's something that we're going to be diving into. But with regard to data and collection and reporting, we have a number of different tools, and a lot of times it's often self-reported through very rudimentary mechanisms. We have, with partnership with New York Power Authority, been really looking to build out our New York Energy Manager that captures building energy consumption across all state agencies. And so that's been a really great tool working in partnership with a lot of different agencies. Although, again, sharing data across agencies and state bureaucracies is also a challenge. So I will leave it at that.
I appreciate that. Anna, we're going to go to you next.
Sure. I mentioned earlier that a lot of our departments report their use through our Energy Star portfolio, and they've been doing that since 2003 when we create our baseline. But we also have our sustainability roadmaps, and that's managed, or at least we corral through DGS's Office of Sustainability. We corral all the departments and agencies to give us their roadmap annually. Now, it's not easy to corral everyone because it's a working group, and this is something I'll speak about later on. Not all sustainability efforts are under DGS. They're cross-cutting along across agencies and departments. So it is a challenge sometimes for our department, while we're large and we're a very large control agency, to reach across the aisle and say, we need this information from all of you. But we have really good, we have a very good working relationship with departments to gather this information. And as the business manager of the state, we share this information to leverage projects to help them, tap into resources. So it's those two things, I think, our Energy Star portfolio and our sustainability roadmaps. And I apologize, I know I mentioned that those maps are the roadmaps are on our website, and the link is down right now. So we're trying to troubleshoot that on our end to address the link break, but you'll be able to see them if they can fix it soon.
Appreciate that. Thank you. All right, and over to you, Chris. So how are you managing the data? Are you experiencing some of the same issues that Emily and Anna are? How would you address that?
Yeah, so in terms of the data collection and that process, we have a dedicated person on our team that is involved with all the state facility related projects, whether again it's solar, LED lighting, deploying EV charging infrastructure within some of our state parking lots. So we have a kind of a dedicated person. I've lucked out with that individual. He's fabulous in terms of keeping track of all the data and everything. And then just kind of going back to what I said earlier, our lead by example is where we update and provide annual results and the status of the implementation and targets. One of the things that we've tried to do really prospectively, as Anna and Emily probably know, is for the audience, if you're trying to reach them, we try to do like one pagers, infographics, just kind of reflecting the results. If you give somebody a 25 or 30-page report or a spreadsheet, you're going to lose a majority of the audience. So we try to tailor these things towards if we're trying to just educate people or sell what we're doing to continue to get state funding for it. We've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. Never going to address all the issues, but that's kind of one of the lessons learned over the last couple of years is data is great, but unless you're an energy wonk or a data type person, it just doesn't translate well to certain audiences.
That's a good point. I think, I've experienced that as well, that, how you want to get the audience, get the information across the audience matters. So I think that's a really good point. I appreciate it. Thank you all. All right. So unfortunately, we are kind of closing up on time. So I'm going to go to our last question for you all to kind of close this out here. For those on the call, what is your one key takeaway from today's conversation? What is your golden nugget? If people are just joining in right now, what is the takeaway on building electrification and its importance to state governments? So Chris, sorry to go back to you, but we're going to go to you next. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is just having realistic expectations for the time frame that it's going to take for a number of these efforts, and that a lot of our state facilities, the buildings, are 20, 30 plus years old. So naturally, as we shift to electrification, it just takes time. And some of these projects, start to finish take, 3 to 4 years, because you're going to encounter stumbling blocks. So that's the biggest thing for me with a lot of these things that we're doing right now. And, from today's call, but also just interacting with my colleagues in other states is just, again, just how much time some of these projects take from start to finish, because in some ways you're changing habits within state government, and even those can take a while for those that are accustomed to certain things and maybe resistant to change.
I appreciate that. All right, going over to Anna.
Sure, I'll share just a handful of my favorite things to consider. So I'm big on starting to benchmark and track your energy and water use just by getting your baseline. It's hard to improve on what you don't measure and what you don't know. Let's say energy efficiency is very cost effective. So government buildings often have a very long life. We have them in our cities and in our regions for 50 plus years. And we should always invest and target on high efficiency and resilience systems and products in those buildings. Kind of continuing on that vein, when you're undergoing major renovations or you're replacing your HVAC or hot water systems, especially for existing buildings, look to replace existing fossil fuel equipment with efficient all-electric alternatives, as long as you have the resiliency on your grid, right? Another great thing to think about for those states who are just getting started, zero emission vehicles are available in many vehicle classifications and can greatly reduce government agency emissions, as long as you also have the EV charging stations to go along with it. And then try to improve your energy storage. It helps regulate the grid along with demand response efforts. So during your high heat days, having that resiliency is incredibly important. And just start today, even if it's just a pilot project.
I appreciate that. I think that's great advice. Emily?
Thank you. And I would definitely echo a lot of those notes. But I think in particular, I think for folks that are listening, I think one sort of common theme is that each of our states have very clear and ambitious goals and targets that have been mandated for state agencies. And I think in order to facilitate that change, having very clear expectations for the agencies goes a long way. And setting those expectations, both whether it's around energy efficiency, whether it's around decarbonization, as well as renewables. I think all of that is really critical first step, I would say, along with benchmarking and really understanding the data.
All right. Well, let me thank all of our panelists today. Emily, Chris, Anna, we really appreciate all the work that you've brought to today's conversation. Thank you very much for your time and your insights. This has been a great discussion. We are going to post all of this information up with this recording on our NASCA Knowledge Center, so you can have access to that as well as the links. We will fix Chris's email on this. We'll get that over to you guys. Apologies to you, Chris, there. But also, as Anna was mentioning, we had, EVs, electric vehicles, the infrastructure there is built into this, as well as just general green energy. And NASCA has done NASCATV webinars on those two topics as well. So certainly check our Knowledge Center for those webinar recordings and some information on those two topics. So that's electric vehicle infrastructure and green energy opportunities. Again, thank you so much for everyone for being here today. I hope you will join us for our next NASCATV webinar on June 21st. Our topic is becoming an employer of choice. So please save June 21st at 3 p.m. Eastern on your calendars. Again, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned, the recording will be up on the Knowledge Center in just the next few days. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you all for being with us today on the webinar. I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, NASCA.